Okay, everybody, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Ken Bronfen, Ida, Dr. Hermond. We may need some more chairs. We have some chairs and not enough chairs. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Great to see everyone. Great spirited group. First of all, before we start, I would like to make sure everyone has met the amazing Judy Glassman. There she is, face behind the name. Judy, hi. Thank you for just being our organizer and getting this all done. You know, when we first started all of this, I didn't realize how many people were in the same mindset and headset about this whole topic. This whole idea of learning, exploring, engaging in the new longevity that is happening in what is really the biggest social revolution of our time and the social movement of our time. You're going to hear a little bit about that tonight, which I think will really amaze you and delight you and may even scare you a little on some of the things that you're going to hear. You know, our speaker tonight is going to do what I call a mini TED Talk to give you an amazing purview, and I'll do a more formal introduction in a minute. But I want to just share some things that you may or may not know, that if you're 50 today and you're healthy, there's a very good chance you're going to live to be 90. And the whole life script of the second half is being torn up, thrown away, rewritten, mostly by people who are 50 plus. And it's happening, and you're beginning to see it in the popular press. And it was a big topic at Davos this year for the first time in terms of the population of the world, which you're going to hear about tonight. But this is a very different group, because this group, if it was its own country, just in the US, would be the third largest country in the world. $8.3 trillion of spending power, turning to $13 trillion of spending power by 2030. And by 2030, those first millennials, those precious millennials, are going to turn 50. Right now, it's 35% of our population, 117 million, growing to 132, 33 million in the next 7 years. And 70% of all of the assets are held by those in the US 50 plus. This is a power supersized generation that has never lived on this planet before. They're healthy, they're fit. Of course, they're the spectrum of the socioeconomic spectrum. There are lots of different issues that we all will grapple with as a culture and a society in terms of lifelong earning power and lifelong health and so forth. But the generation of what we call the reimagineers, the people who are redefining, are really the ones who are leading the way with being fit, being active, health span, lifespan, living longer, changing what 60, 70, 80-year-olds can do. Not to embarrass him, but where's Alan Patricoff? Alan is 88 and just walked the New York City Marathon this past November, and raised, by the way, $575,000 while he was at it for the Alzheimer's Foundation. So Alan, to me, is a walking example of the new longevity in all of its form. There's something happening right now called the World Marathon Challenge. 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. Now, I ran 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 years. This is 7 days. And there's an 80-year-old man who just finished the second of the 7 today. This is the new longevity. These are the new players. And the lack of representation in the culture, the people are way ahead of the culture. The people, like most social movements, are way ahead of the institutions of business, of government, of institutions that we know. One of my new best friends is Amy Bayer, who just launched a studio in Los Angeles. She's only producing romantic comedies for people 50 plus, with actors and actresses that are over 50. She just had her first film, Bryan Cranston and Annette Bening, called George and Marge Live Large. Mm-hmm. And you might have seen it. And #1 on Paramount Plus as soon as it hit. And she's got 15 films in the pipeline. And Amy would say that Netflix and all the streamers are just dying for more and more content for the 50 plus market, because it's all changing. And they're all changing, and we're all changing. So how do we put a spotlight on that? how do we do it in all aspects of the culture? And this is really what this group in gelling is all about. As we continue to watch this unveil, you may have seen in the Hollywood Reporter the interview with Jane Fonda, who's 85 and just has an amazing movie coming out with Sally Field and Lily Tomlin, and I think it's called 80 for Brady. And it's a comedy about these three women going to see Tom Brady play. So I predict you're going to see a lot of change that's going to be right in front of us. Every day, 10,000 people in this country are turning 65. So this is just not about 50 plus. This is about 65 and older. The challenge we're going to have, not just as those of us who are fortunate to be able to reinvent and try new things and pivot into new jobs, careers, launch businesses, do all the things that we talk about, is the country is going to also go through a lot of crisis. And what I mean by that is there are the tens and tens of millions of people who rely on Social Security, who rely on Medicare. The Social Security Trust is going to go bust in 10 years. Peter knows that all too well. Peter's the CEO of the American Society on Aging in Washington and does a lot of work. Washington is frozen. Many Americans who are on Social Security rely on Social Security as 50% of their income. It's only supposed to be 30%. There are no more pensions. So with this 100-year life, so I've just joined the board of the Stanford University Center on Longevity. It just wrote an amazing paper called The New Map of Life. The 100-year life is here. Your kids are going to live to be 100. If you have a 5-year-old in your family, Mindy, there's a 50% chance that those kids will live to be 100. They will have 60-year careers. They will have multiple careers. They're going to live an entirely different kind of life than we know. And we're in it and we're on the cusp of it. And David Sinclair from Harvard, who you might know, just wrote a piece this past week. The person who's going to live to 150 is alive today with the longevity and the healthcare and all the things. So we are on the cusp of what is probably going to be the biggest social movement that we'll ever experience in our lifetime. And you're going to hear more about this from Bradley when he talks. What I'd like to tell you as Roar Masterminders, and thank you all for joining our group. This is the inaugural group, and many of you saw the roster and amazing people, and more who are joining as we speak. We're going to have a series of events throughout the year. We're going to have events. We're going to have roundtables, think tanks, pop-ups. We're going to have a summit in November here at the Hearst Tower, which you'll all be getting the dates and the details. And we're going to cover a variety of things. So I'm going to tell you a little bit, tease out a little bit of what's coming, and Judy will be communicating. Adam Gopnik, who many of you know, the essayist from the New Yorker, has a new book out called The Real Work, The Mystery of Mastery, and How We Keep Learning. And thanks to Clara, who introduced me to Adam, we're going to do an event with him here. This is also about how you continue to learn in the second half of your life, that we have to be lifelong learners, especially with the world changing around us constantly, and not just in our work life, but in our personal lives and our lifestyles. We have Dr. Mark Lax with us tonight from Weill Cornell Medicine, who I'm happy to announce is going to be our Roar Forward sponsor this year in terms of all medicine. He's one of the premier, I call him the most premier doctor in longevity in the country, and he'll be doing a lot of content for us and with us during the course of the year. The Alliance for Lifelong Learning, which is a Washington-based think tank, a nonprofit, which is really advocating and trying to find ways so that people who are not as privileged as we are do have a stream of lifetime income. And how do we build different models of that? How do we build different models of intergenerational groups working together? For the first time in history, 5 generations will be working in the workplace at the same time. 5 generations, which is really interesting when you think about it. We're going to have some lifestyle stuff, which will be great. Clara Glaucheska, who you know is one of the most premier travel editors in the country, if not the world, is going to give us some insights on travel. And we've got Eddie Alterman, who's our chief brand officer at Car and Driver Road and Track, who is going to talk about electric vehicles and self-sustaining cars and all of the technology that is being built into automotive product to address what is a significantly aging and older driver base in the US and in the world. But we all want to drive much longer. So how do you get 80 and 90 and 100-year-olds driving safely when you have smart cars that are helping that process. So that's all going to be happening. Art Taylor, who is the CEO of the Better Business Bureau Wise Giving Alliance, and my professor at Columbia. I just finished a master's degree a year ago. It's all his fault. Will be doing some work with us on the philanthropy side. And last but not least, Michael Sebastian, where are you? We're working on trying to get someone from the Senate Intelligence Committee on Aging to come in and talk to us about what's happening on the Hill. So we have a lot happening that's in the works. It's going to play out over the course of the year. It will culminate in the summit. And I'll be really excited to have all of you being engaged and involved in that. So in case you haven't figured it out, I've got this new passion about shedding a spotlight on this whole topic. We put out a newsletter every month, which hopefully many of you receive. You'll be getting, as part of the Roar Mastermind, every other week, you'll be getting something called the Roar Bulletins, things that you should know about what is happening in this new longevity space across the spectrum: culture, entertainment, cogeneration of intergenerational workflow and workforces, investors, age tech, all of the above. So you'll be getting a good dose of things that you can read at your leisure. This March, we're launching the Roar Report, which is a B2B subscription, which is a more chunky, built-out piece of content that you can read at your leisure as well. I don't know if Ken Brompton's still here, but Ken is our business partner here at Hearst, and we're doing lots of seminars and workshops. So we got a lot. We're getting out there and talking to the world and spreading the news and spreading the love. So during this journey, I've been a student of this whole space and learning an enormous amount through so many people who've been teaching me along the way, like Peter and others. And I met Bradley Schurman. And Bradley, we found out we're from the same hometown, so Pittsburghers all stick together. I don't know, Betsy's a Pittsburgher too. Any other Pittsburghers in the group? So, poor Steelers, go Eagles. But poor Eagles. But anyway, Bradley also wrote a book. He's a top demographer based in Washington. He wrote a book called The Super Age. He is an amazing spokesperson on what is happening globally to our world. So this is just not an American phenomena. It is a huge global phenomena that you're starting to read about and learn about in the popular press. It has lots of ripple effect and impact for all of us, professionally, personally, our lifestyles, for the rest of our lives, and certainly for our children and our grandchildren's lives. So with further ado, I'm going to welcome Bradley up to the stage. We're doing a mini TED Talk that he's just going to give you some amazing highlights. And we have his book for all of you when you leave. So Bradley, welcome.
Thanks.
Nice to see you, fellow Pittsburgher.
It's so very nice to be here tonight, and of course, to be in this beautiful space. Thank you, Michael, the Roar team, and of course, everyone at Hearst. We are in a period of disruptive demographic change. And tonight, I'm going to give you a top-line overview of what's happening both domestically and internationally that's driving this change. But I want you to remember something right here, right now. This is a relatively new phenomena in the history of the world. But it's a phenomena that spans back about 250 years to the start of the Industrial Revolution. The second the Industrial Revolution started, a number of things started happening to our society. The first thing we saw was birth rates started to drop. Immediately started to drop as we moved from the fields to the factories, as we built social welfare systems, as we saw the survival rate of children improve over time. When my grandfather was born in 1914, he had a 1 out of 2 chance of surviving into adulthood. Today, children have well over a 90% chance of surviving into adulthood. At the same time, history has largely been written by birth rates and death rates and migration. That's the story of our people. How we move, how we build society based on those numbers. But what we've never experienced universally, and Michael has already alluded to this, is that longevity has increased for nearly every person on the planet. Average life expectancy for nearly all 300,000 years of human existence on this planet was 35 years. Today, a child born in this country can expect to live 77. That's our average life expectancy today. It was 79. It dipped down a bit during COVID. It dipped down a bit because of those diseases of despair that are hitting the urban core, hitting the countryside. But on the whole, we've been on a pretty good upward tick. There's nothing that says this has to stop, but there's nothing to say these gains can't be erased either. At the same time, we're starting to see depopulation occur across the world. Now, depopulation happens all the time. Michael and I are from Pittsburgh. Following the collapse of the steel mill, Pittsburgh lost half its population. We're used to this, right? Not everywhere. From 1950 to today, China grew its population by about 1 billion people, give or take 100 million. Last year, they lost a population the size of San Francisco, 850,000 people, and that's based on their official numbers. We know those numbers are probably 2, 3, 5x at least. But a country that maybe takes better care of its numbers, Japan, lost a population the size of Las Vegas for the second year in a row. Japan has been dropping in size for over a decade now. At the same time, the average age of the population is pushing up. This changes everything. This changes the way society operates. It changes the way the economy operates. It changes the political nature of things. We all remember what the past decade has been like here for political instability. It happens elsewhere too. But this period of demographic change is not going away. There are 5 areas that I want to quickly focus on and how they directly impact you, your business, and your personal life. The first is home. Home is changing faster now than it ever has. 2 primary trends are happening now. We're seeing the rapid increase of people living as singles in their home alone. We're also seeing the rapid increase of multi-generational living. During COVID, for the first time since the 1940s, since World War II, 52% of adults ages 18 to 30 were living at home with their parents. Because the cost of housing has outpaced salary growth and the cost of healthcare and other things like education, people can no longer afford to buy a home. This has pushed them into intergenerational living. So we're starting to see children living with parents and grandparents. This is changing a lot of the social dynamics of what a house is. Single people are living alone more often too. This is new for us in this novel era. How are they engaging properly? They're at a higher risk for isolation. They're at higher risk for cost because they're bearing more cost themselves. How are services delivered to these people? Are they going to co-house? We're seeing new models pop up around housing that are innovative. Golden Girls type model housing for the new era. Things are also changing at work. All the terms we've heard in the past year: Great Resignation, quiet quitting, inflation. These are all being driven by demographic change because guess what? Something funny happened during COVID. 3 million excess older people left the workforce than typically do. Okay, can we make up for that? Not when there's enough people coming in. Gen Z is 69 million people. Millennials are 72 million. Boomers are now 69 million. They are a small generation, Gen Z. That means we have a smaller pool of labor that we can actually tap into. So that's pushing up costs across the board. At the same time, we have this bias against older people in the workforce. They're not adaptive enough. They can't change quick enough. They don't know technology. They cost too much. Not necessarily the case. Older people tend to be more reliable in jobs. They're certainly more loyal. They've got this wealth of experience that when tapped into properly allows for a pretty impressive spillover effect. So you stop making the same mistakes over and over and over again with younger people. And they build resilience for this new era, whereas Michael so aptly pointed out, we have a novel consumer group that's emerging here. How are 20-somethings going to serve 80-somethings without living that experience? Bring the 80-somethings in. In the community, we're seeing drastic change as well. Obviously, this goes to the big issues like Social Security and Medicare. How will these services be delivered? But more importantly, how are communities designed? Are they livable? Can people walk from point A to point B? Can you use a wheelchair or a walker or a cane? Are the services in the neighborhoods really being delivered with great effect and efficiency? Because it is expensive to take care of a large aging population when you don't have this pool of very large labor right behind you. So we're gonna have to leverage things like technology going forward. In business, because these younger populations are getting smaller and smaller each year, Gen Z, again, smaller than millennials, Gen Alpha is even smaller than Gen Z. So if you think this is all going to turn around tomorrow, it's not going to happen. Everyone needs to get that in their head very quickly. And if we think about how long, how many of you have kids, by the way? How long did it take them to become an adult? 25 years, 30 years, maybe? No, not yet. It takes a while to build a fully functioning human being. So even if tomorrow there's this magic turnaround and all of a sudden we have all of these births that mimic the baby boom of the 1940s, 1950s, and early 1960s, we've got to wait 25 years, 30 years, if we're lucky. Globally, because this is happening in every market, China, Japan, these great big pools of labor, Europe will lose 150 million people by the end of this century. Where are we going to get the labor? Who's going to do the jobs? There is one place on this planet where we can expect all population growth to happen, that is sub-Saharan Africa. So if you're looking for new markets, that's where you look. But when you're looking domestically, when you're looking into Europe, when you're looking into Asia, places that were already doing business, the future is gray. It's older, it's more mature. This is where you'll find your workers, and this is where you'll find your consumers. As individuals, as Michael said, you are writing the next chapter of our history because you are the tip of the spear. There's never been a history written before where there are this many people in midlife, this many people entering later life. So we have to accept a new mantra for this new age. Shift our ideas away from what people can't do and focus on what they can do. It's simple, but it takes a while for people to get their head around this idea because we deal with a bias every day, deep down inside, in our institutions, in our systems called ageism. It gets in the way of rational decision-making. So each and every one of us need to remember that we're the chosen few. We're living this new longevity. We're living this possibility of a long life. It's not evenly guaranteed, though. So when we look at national averages, we think about what longevity looks like for the average person. There is no average person, per se. There's the government statistic that says 77 is average life expectancy, but that does not tell the whole picture of demographics or longevity in this nation. Across the country, 3/4 of the counties, 1/2 of the states are exhibiting demographic patterns similar to China. Rural counties are shrinking at an astronomical pace. We were talking earlier before we started about food insecurity. There are similar levels of food security in rural America that exist in the urban core. These are problems that we have to consider if we're really going to tap into the power of this new age. The other thing to consider is that we all don't get to live old. Averages exist for a reason, right? In this city, this beautiful city of New York, there's a 25-year gap, 25-year gap between the richest and the poorest in terms of how long they live. This is almost always tied to race. If you're living in DC, it's similar. In Chicago, it's even worse. There's a 30-year gap. Nationwide, if you grow up on the reservation in Stillwell, Oklahoma, your life expectancy is 56. 56. That's lower than Niger. That's lower than Afghanistan. That's lower than war zones. The highest life expectancy, though, is in North Carolina, in the Triangle. 97 is average life expectancy there. So people who are high net worth, mostly white, living in North Carolina have 2 extra generations to live against their peers who are indigenous on the reservation. These are massive gaps to fill. But for those of us who are leading this new era of the new longevity, where we are these new consumers, where we're driving force for change in the world, not just in terms of our behaviors at work, at home, and in the community, but as good social agents, this is one of our challenges to get to. As Michael said, there is a new longevity that's forming here. We're looking at a 100-year life within this group of peers. We're starting to see different spaces of life open up, the reimagineers. We're also seeing things like extended adolescence pop as well. We're starting to see that individuals no longer follow the path of our moms, our dads, our grandmas, our grandpas. They don't go from childhood to adulthood to retirement or old age. They go back and forth. My parents are 72 years old. My dad's an entrepreneur. My mom's an educator. They retired 10 years ago. They are still working. They went back to work. They stepped out of work. They went back to work. They stepped out of work. In fact, when I wrote The Super Age, one of the real ideas came for the story from this man who was working the Apple store in Pittsburgh, in Sewickley, Chase, I'd rather. And he was a 70-something guy. He appeared 70-something, if you can appear 70-something, which is not the case anymore. He had gray hair. He was balding, wore these heavy glasses. And I said, I'm sorry to do this. I know it's inappropriate. Why are you working? My father just died, he said. I looked at him puzzled. Your father just died. He died at 106. He had Alzheimer's for the past 10 years. This is my second time coming out of retirement. Why? I can't afford to live to 106. And I feel that when I'm here, I have purpose. Purpose will be the one thing that drives us moving forward, in addition to building that economic security. Because we're closing on time, because I'm sure you have some questions when we end, I'd like to leave you with a top-line thought from the book. And frankly, the thesis of the Super Age. If we do nothing today, if we maintain the systems that we've had in this country since the 1930s, the reliance on Social Security, the reliance on Medicare, the inability to engage older populations, we are heading towards calamity. If we're willing to adjust our models, if we're willing to think differently about ourselves, the people we work with, the folks that we love, we could actually move very quickly into a very virtuous, but also profitable cycle. If you work longer, you're healthier, period. But you're not just healthier physically, you're also healthier financially, less reliant. You're also putting more money back into the system, making the system stronger. You're also creating a brand new consumer group. And then once again, when you have that new consumer group, you're then engaging those older workers again to help serve those consumers even further. One stat that I like to point out is that 2/3, and Michael, you quoted this in your Car and Driver article, I believe, 2/3 of all new cars are bought by people over the age of 50. 2/3 of all new cars. So when innovation is happening around automobiles, it's happening because of older people. BMW is one of those companies that have engaged older workers in a really miraculous way over a decade ago. There is the potential to change. There is the potential to innovate. If everyone here takes an ounce or two of strategic foresight, visions the future they want for themselves, they can apply it to others. And on that, thank you. We can take a few questions. Yeah.
Hi there, Herman.
Hi.
I wanted to submit this idea that I believe there's a whole group of 50 plus, especially women, who are actually very interested in re-entering the workforce, because I talk to them every day in
Yep.
practice, and also I was just at a social setting with 10 of them, and they have real difficulty
Mhm.
because in fact it is real that they are from a digital standpoint behind, they are slower, they haven't kept up with technology, and maybe they've been raising family, maybe they've
Mhm.
left the workforce because of reliance economically on their partner, and all of a sudden they find themselves in middle age and they need to get back or want to get back because of the sense of purpose, but they can't.
Yeah.
Can you comment on what's happening in that area? Is there
Well,
are there resources? Is there something in the model that's changing to accommodate?
yeah, I think first of all, everyone should remember that a husband is the worst retirement plan you could possibly have. So I know it might be a little late for these ladies, but that is reality. Yes, yes, yes. No, there's plenty of ways to get reskilled. The big barrier is that recruitment systems are not set up to consider older workers. And we had this conversation early on this evening before everyone came into the room about how do you shift the hearts and minds of employers? Well, employers have to first understand that there's a labor shortage. They keep thinking that it's a labor shortage period. There isn't a labor shortage period. It's that we fixated our eyes on 16 to 64 and said, well, that's it. That's all we have. Yet we have all this productive opportunity that's 65 plus. A colleague of ours, Carrie Hannon, wrote a great book called In Control at 50 Plus. It's a good way, it's a good primer for individuals who are maybe later in life looking to re-enter, looking to remain in the workforce on what to do. For those people that are in the workforce today are in fear of maybe losing their job or maybe being the victim of ageism, there are certain things that you can do. First of all, you're legally protected under the law. It's hard to prove, but you are legally protected under the law, but from discrimination. But the first and foremost thing that I tell anyone is stay as curious as possible. When an assignment comes up, take it. Be as aggressive at work as you were when you were 20. That shows that you're a valuable member of the team. And also stay up on your technology. That is the one thing that is just going at lightning speed right now. And if you're not up to date with the tech is going to blow right past you. Our systems are set up in many ways to favor the young. That has been the case since about 1962, when the first boomer entered the workforce. And all of a sudden, we had this incredible amount of young labor at our disposal. We had these retirement systems that basically were encouraging people, and a whole industry, mind you, that was encouraging people to leave the workforce. Employers had an out. Get rid of the expensive ones, bring in the cheap ones. We're all happy because everyone gets to live a nice, comfortable retirement. We get cheap labor, the economy grows, yada, yada, yada. That reality doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. It is gone. So engaging talent now, you have to look at a larger pool. Because the United States is slowing its growth, we're not immune to this demographic change. We're not immune to our society contracting here. We'll have to expand what we consider to be active markets as well. So, Nielsen's still measuring 54 at tops. 54 tops. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. It's embarrassing. There's a whole marketplace of people over the age of 54. In fact, people 50 to 74 control more wealth than everyone under 50. Everyone under 50. And they're willing to spend it because they're actively engaged at work. So it's going to take some time. That's the top line answer. Culture change always does. When Social Security was put in place in 1935, it took about 30 years for the retirement industry to really sink its teeth into this country, to really become a life stage. In the 90s, we started seeing some fractures in the system. That's when we bottomed out in terms of labor force participation for older workers at 14%. We're up to 22% today. I see us getting back to 1950 numbers where we're nearing 50% labor force participation rate of 50 plus workers. But we have to get through the culture change piece. 3 years of COVID isn't enough.
Bob, just one comment off of Bradley's. I'll add that part of this is, and Mindy and I were talking about this earlier, part of this is cultural representation of what 50 plus people look like in a contemporary way. It is the most, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, and we look at the representation of people in advertising and entertainment, et cetera, it is abominable. And to pick up on a point, only 8% of American companies include age in their DEI policy. 8%. And the representation of it, I just did a podcast with the ANA, the Association of National Advertisers, this past week. If you look at, once upon a time around the table, the creative table, it was all white men who were creating advertising. And their vision of what women wanted, in fact, I think I can even say that for many, many years, the editor-in-chief of Good Housekeeping in this company was a male. Go figure, right, Jane? Jane oversees that team now. That was many, many years ago. Then the culture moved, and we had women around the table in creating advertising. Then we had Black people around the table. Then we had Latina around the table. Then we had LGBTQ around the table. What we don't have around the table are people 50 plus. There's no representation in the creative field, in the entertainment field. My friend Amy said when someone goes in to pitch a new show to Netflix or Amazon, we only want people who are going to, young people who are going to create entertainment for young people. And so it's a disconnect because so there's a lot of work to do. And we're hoping that during the course of this group, as it congeals and we're all participating in some way, shape, or form, we become the influencers, the super influencers who go into the entertainment space and the branding space and the workspace. And we are voices collectively and individually around this topic, because as Bradley said, the train has left in a very big way, and we have to change as a country, culture, of society, not just for us, but for our kids. And we want to be the role model so that kid says, oh, I can go run a marathon at 88. That's really that's amazing. I want to be like that guy. Anyway, Bob, you had a question.
I love your presentation. I thought one of the issues you were talking about is there anybody in Washington? Is there any kind of political leadership anywhere?
Peter? No.
Because
no.
It's a difference in a certain.
Well, you said
what's going on there.
Well, I think France is actually a great thing to look at because you've actually got people taking to the streets to save their pension system for union workers. If you haven't read about it, read about it. It's interesting. It's fascinating to see a political leader like Macron, who's relatively young, taking on this really entrenched social welfare system in France. Domestically, there's some irony to our social welfare programs here, and I think it's a dirty little secret in Washington. Maybe it's not. These programs, the moment they become, they're no longer solvent, they just stop paying less. They don't go away. Social Security doesn't go away in 2033, 34. Medicare doesn't go away. They just stop paying you less. So this is kind of like the frog in the pot. People are going to start realizing that their benefits are going down and down. The question is, will they act? That's TBD. I haven't seen any older people in the streets saying, save my Social Security yet. They vote with that in mind, but there certainly haven't been popular protests around it. Social Security is something we pay into. So people do believe that it comes back to them at the end of the day.
Thanks for your talk and questions. I'm John Sickle from Hallmark Media. I want to talk to Amy about 50 plus romantic movies because we need that. I'm also a champion of 54 plus.
Mm-hmm.
My question today kind of follows the last one. I had an aunt who died last year at 98.
Mm-hmm.
And at 92, she called my father and said, I've run out of money. When I think about if my kids last to 150, we are lucky
Right.
in this room.
So
And I'm really, to me, an urgent question.
Yeah.
Because, great, we can run marathons, but how do we save our country from economic doom?
So I dedicate a whole section of the book to this question of our path towards dystopia. And our path towards dystopia is actually peppered with advancements in science, which is ironic. But there are these people like David Sinclair, Nir Barzilai, that are looking at extending human life. They want to slow the aging of cells. They want to treat aging as a disease, not a process. These are the folks that are really trying to push the upper limits of human longevity. And there's nothing to say there is an upper limit. The oldest person ever lived made it to 122. The oldest person alive today is 115. There's nothing to say that we can't push past that. In fact, there's a futurist who says that we're approaching longevity escape velocity, meaning that same thing we got to get to the moon is happening on longevity now. So what? What happens if we're retiring people we're pushing people out at 45 from the advertising agencies, maybe younger, in tech, under 30? That's all they want. We have to be able to not only consider what a long life looks like, but also consider what we want our own future to be. The piece that I think folks miss, and Laura Deming, who's one of the big venture capitalists in this space, Laura Deming, I think, has a unique perspective on it. Laura says, and I agree with her on this, we're no longer in the mindset of simply tacking years onto the end. Not those sick years, those years of decline. What's actually happening is we're pushing healthy years into the middle. So we get to experience this great middle age rather than it being, 15, 20 years. It's actually pushing to 30 or 40 years where we're living in great health. We can run those marathons. We can run those companies. We can stay active consumers. We can have multiple families, and some people are doing that now. All of that remakes the map. That is what the new longevity looks like. But we can only do it if we really turn our minds around what it means to be old. If we keep attaching a number to it, which has been government policy in one shape or another since the Greco-Roman period. 65 has always been that number, by the way, in case you were wondering. That's not new. We've attached that as old since antiquity. If we don't turn that around, we're destined for disaster. So we can do that, but we are the tip of the spear. Hi.
This has been great.
Thank you.
I'm very passionate about this topic. I'm Mindy Grossman, and prior to my new role of being a partner in an advisory firm, I went to do the kind of transformation of Weight Watchers and perception and everything else. So I think what Michael talked about, I experienced. So I turned 65 in September. And when I look at how women my age are portrayed, it's very different. And so if you remember, there was something called See Her that was created to change how women and girls were treated in media. We almost need the version of that.
Yes.
Not almost, we need the version of that because we all cringe when we see some of this media that's out there.
Well, there were two archetypes for actors who are old, and you had to fall into one of the two if you wanted work as an older actor.
Women, short, gray hair, and giant.
You either had to be kind of the confused aunt toddling around, or you had to be the doting grandfather. Those were your roles.
I think the second thing is, and you made the point, we are extending longevity, but we haven't changed any of the policies, and 65 has been that number. And if we want people to hire older people, I don't know if you noticed, they had to change their bylaws at Target to let Brian Cornell stay 3 more years because they had a cap.
They had to do.
65.
They had to do it at IBM for Ginny Rometty.
Exactly. So if we're not going to change those, so I think there is a lot of policy that has to go into play. Do you?
I think Michael hits it on the head. We are at the precipice of a revolution right now. And I look at Peter. because Peter represents one of the larger and most important organizations on aging in the country, we have to remember that those of us that are in this room are exceptional. We're exceptional in our longevity. There are many people that live in this country that rely on Social Security, that rely on Medicare at very high rates. So when we consider what our future looks like, we can't just think about the future we want unless we feel like we can apply that future to other people as well. We can close that longevity gap. We can extend healthy working years, healthy living years. But I agree with you. We have a Herculean task. But as the tip of the spear, there will be others that will follow us that will carry that torch into the future. Hi.
Thank you. I had a question. Where do the values and attitudes come in of the different groups? Because I feel like we can change the marker, we can move 65 to 85, but I was in a King's supermarket and a young lady came up to me and she was going to educate me on how to do a self-checkout of a grapefruit. I had to crack up. I mean, she's sitting there. She's like, you just do this and do that. And then there was this other older woman at a register down.
Yeah.
I purposely said, thank you. I'll just go over there. But I think we're suffering from a void of values. And I think it permeates in our politics. You can go out and retail today and you shop and it's amazing. Service to me is just, it's a lost art. And so how do we start to bridge the gap in values and attitudes between corporation, the private sector, the government, and the people? Because I think that's a big part of it.
I am no expert in that per se, how to bridge that completely. But what I have seen in my research and my experience is that when you transform companies and communities to be more age inclusive, meaning that we're living arm in arm with young people, old people, and everyone in between, when we live in multi-generational housing with mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, or we live in multi-generational streets, empathy immediately starts to bleed in. And all of a sudden, we start considering what Mrs. Jones down the street might want or need out of her life. We don't look at older people anymore as a monolithic group. We have been spoon-fed in this country now, mostly through mass media, but also through public policy, that people have an expiration date at 65. Second somebody knows you're 65, you're targeted, you're marked. You should be out, you should be trying. Why haven't you stopped yet? Why are you even asking that question? But there's also that question of utility. One of the cultural phenomenons that I've always been befuddled with is the infantilization of older people. It's a disturbing thing. We all do it though. We've all done it. We've all done it at some point. We've infantilized an older adult. We treat them like a child. I think that there's a social connection to when we were young and our parents took care of us when we were sick. And we think of that as the way that we treat people who we see as sick or infirmed. We treat them like we were treated. But it comes off as treating somebody as a child. It's problematic. We do stop valuing them. So one of the ways to bring value back, since all of human history, people worked until they couldn't, is that people stay engaged and work longer. The more people working, the more empathy there is, the more value there is to contributions. In the 1980s, I think it was the New Republic called Social Security recipients the greedy geezers. That's stuck. When people think of you as a cost center, they're going to look at you as a cost center. And that may sound harsh, that may sound mean, it's reality. If you're contributing, if you're making money for a company, people are excited about that. They see value in you. So, yeah.
Stick around and have a drink and chat with more. But I think one of the things we're saying is that, social movements, all social movements start with people. And oftentimes it's the people who are head of the culture in the society. And I will use, and I've said this in various talks that I've done, and I think Bradley has too, I would almost make the analogy to the women's movement. In the early days of the women's movement, when my mother was a young woman, yes, there were doctors and lawyers, but basically she was told by the culture, you can be a nurse, you can be a secretary, you can be a teacher, you can be a homemaker. That was it. Yes, there were always outliers, but it wasn't mainstream until women stood up and created this movement and changed everything. And today, a young woman who's 25 can be the president, she can be on the Supreme Court, she can be the head of a CEO of a company, not enough. She can do she has many, many choices. How do we, as this notion that by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 or older, they are going to be pissed. They're going to be pissed about how they're treated by government policy, how they're treated by marketers, how they're treated by entertainment, they are going to stand up and say, enough. We're there. We're there. It's happening already with all, think of your peers and think of the people that you know just in your life. So that notion of the 65 expiration date and 65 was a government-sanctioned thing that has only existed in the world for less than 100 years. It was sanctioned in 1935. It was enhanced with Medicare in the 1960s. Del Webb stepped in and built Sun City, in Phoenix, and said, you can have the life now, you can step out and you have a pension and you have Social Security and you have Medicare. Woohoo, go live a life. What they forgot to say is the life expectancy at the time was about 66, 67. So you lived for a few years and then you were gone. Now think about that spread, the impact, the economic impact, the cultural impact, the social impact, all the above. We're there. We think it's the next big social movement that is going to be driven by the people. It's already being driven by the people who are going to be at the voting booth.
Yep.
And who are going to make the change. And when they find out their Social Security is coming down and their benefits are coming down and all that stuff, they're going to be pissed. So with that, we will say, thanks for joining. We have Bradley's book. Feel free to stick around and chat. We have a beautiful Roar t-shirt. It's great fabric, Nina. You'll love it. It's beautiful fabric. Totally fabric. Small, medium, and large. Pick your size. Anyway, thank you all for here. Have a drink, hang out, enjoy. Thank you.